You're Rick, right? I'm Negan. And I do not appreciate you killing my men.
We killed them all.
Most people remember the night Rick Grimes became the villain as the night Negan made him kneel. That is the wrong night. Therefore, the night that matters happens earlier, before Lucille, before the lineup, before anybody in Alexandria has seen the man who will break them. It happens in a church. Then it happens in a dark rectangular building full of people Rick has never met, people he has already decided do not get to wake up. Rick stands over a sleeping savior and drives a knife into the man's head. That is not a tragic accident in a firefight. That is the plan working exactly as designed. But this is not a story about Rick secretly turning into Negan. He does not. Negan builds a system of ownership, spectacle, and fear, and he enjoys the theater of it. Rick is trying to keep a starving community alive. Those are not the same thing, and pretending they are is lazy. So the harder question is narrower. When did protecting his people become permission to decide that every stranger behind a door had already forfeited a life? To answer that fairly, you have to follow the evidence in the order Rick receives it, not the order the fandom argues about years later, because that order is what builds his certainty piece by piece, until certainty starts doing the work that information should have done. It starts on the road in No Way Out. Daryl, Abraham, and Sasha are hauling fuel home when a biker crew blocks the path. The men take their weapons and announce that everything they own now belongs to someone named Negan. They are not negotiating, they are collecting, and they plan to drive the three of them back toward wherever they came from, which means whatever home is waiting at the end of that road is about to be inspected. Then Abraham asks the question he was told not to ask.
Who's Negan?
The leader explains that his people usually introduce themselves by killing someone immediately. For a second, he pretends this will be different, but then he changes his mind and prepares to kill Abraham anyway. Not because Abraham raised a weapon, but because disobedience needs to be memorable. Before he can fire, Daryl steps out from behind the fuel truck and puts an RPG into the whole crew. Rick is not there. He does not see the bodies. He hears about it later. Therefore, he also hears the part that should keep any leader awake. Those men intended to follow the trail home. They did not know Alexandria yet, but if Daryl's rocket had come a few seconds later, they might have been led straight to its gate. So this is not paranoia. This is not Rick inventing monsters so he can feel useful. The road gives him a clean reason to treat the saviors as an active threat. But the danger is what happens next, when proof that one threat is real starts feeling like proof that every person connected to that name can be sentenced in advance. Therefore, the rest of the picture arrives at Hilltop in knots untie. Rick's group shows up looking for food at the exact moment 3 Hilltop traders return from a savior run. Tim and Marcia are dead. Craig is being held. His brother Ethan has been sent home with one order: stab Gregory, Hilltop's leader, or Craig does not come back. Ethan drives a knife into Gregory's stomach. Rick tackles him and kills him while the attack is still happening. That part matters. This is not Rick executing a prisoner on a hunch. This is Rick stopping a stabbing in real time. But the real shift comes after, when Jesus explains the machine that produced the stabbing. The saviors take half of Hilltop's supplies, crops, and livestock. When they first imposed that arrangement, they beat a 16-year-old named Rory to death in front of the community. Hilltop does not know how many people Negan has. They have only seen groups as large as 20. That is the intelligence picture Rick is holding. Murder as introduction, extortion as policy, a hostage still alive, and no reliable count of the army behind the name. Therefore, Daryl offers a different trade. Alexandria will rescue Craig and remove the savior threat. Maggie negotiates hard for half of Hilltop's current supplies, then asks for the thing Alexandria still lacks: everything Hilltop knows about the compound. The bargain is ugly and logical at the same time. The saviors are real. Alexandria is hungry. Hilltop will pay fighters in food to kill people those fighters have never met. Andy has been inside the satellite outpost while unloading supplies. He remembers a rectangular building, one apparent entrance, at least 2 guards, and a hallway that might lead to an armory. But he does not know how many people sleep inside. He does not know whether other bases exist. He does not know where the main settlement is. He does not even know what Negan really means as a structure. So Rick has evidence, but only one piece of a larger machine, and nobody in that room can answer the question that should have stopped the certainty cold. How much of a system do you need to understand before you sentence every person inside one building to death? Therefore, back in Alexandria, Rick takes the plan to the church. He tells them the saviors will find them eventually. If Alexandria waits, it loses surprise. If Alexandria waits while low on food, it may lose the fight that follows. But Morgan offers another path. Approach them, talk, give them a choice. Rick hears him. He asks whether anyone else supports that approach. The room stays silent. We kill them all. It is not a scream. That is what makes it land so hard. Rick sounds calm, steady, almost practical. Therefore, by the end of the meeting, the moral question has been converted into logistics. Enter before dawn, secure the armory, kill the saviors while they sleep. This is the moment the title hangs on, not Negan's clearing, not even the first bedroom. Here, because from this point forward, Rick is not only deciding that Alexandria must defend itself, he is deciding that nobody behind that door gets to be anything other than the enemy he has already described. He says nobody is required to kill, but anyone who stays in Alexandria has to accept the decision. Maggie joins because she negotiated the deal. Glenn and Heath admit neither has ever killed a living person. Therefore, if the plan works, their first human kill will not happen in a fight. It will happen beside a bed. Before they leave, Rick reduces the whole night to 5 words. This is how we eat. So the plan has to be clever. They take a walker head and alter it to resemble Gregory. Rick changes the nose so the damage looks like the result of a struggle. Andy approaches as a Hilltop delivery man the guards already recognize, carrying what they believe is proof of Gregory's death. Daryl kills the first guard without a sound. The second returns with Craig, and Michonne kills him before he understands what is happening. Craig is pulled clear before the people deeper inside know they are under attack. Alexandria does not improvise at the door. It arrives with a story designed to open that door quietly. Therefore, the pairs move room to room. Rick finds a sleeping savior and puts a knife through his head. Then Glenn and Heath enter a bedroom. Neither has killed a living person before. Glenn kneels beside the first bed and hesitates long enough for the weight of it to show on his face. When he finally pushes the knife down, the act leaves him shaken. At the second bed, Heath cannot make his body move, so Glenn sees what it is doing to him, takes the knife from his hand, and carries that second death himself. Only then does Glenn notice the photographs. The wall is covered in images of people with their heads destroyed, deaths displayed like trophies. It is the kind of evidence that makes a person tell himself the nightmare was necessary. But look at the order carefully. Those photographs do not identify who took each picture. They do not prove which sleeping man committed which killing. They cannot, by definition, be the reason Glenn kills, because both men are already dead when he sees them. Therefore, the decision that put those knives in the room was made in a church by people those men never met, before anybody in Alexandria knew that wall existed. Director Greg Nicotero later explained the Polaroids in almost exactly those terms. They take some of the sting out afterward. They let Glenn believe that by doing something horrific, he may have stopped another victim from ending up on that wall. Even in the director's explanation, the photographs are moral relief after the act, not the trigger for it. Moments later, a savior surprises Abraham and Sasha. Sasha stabs him, but he still triggers the alarm. Only then does the quiet execution become an open gunfight. Glenn and Heath eventually reach the armory and use its weapons to fight their way out. By morning, the outpost has fallen, Craig is safe, and nobody from Rick's group is dead. So the plan works so cleanly that Rick's understanding looks confirmed. One building, one enemy, problem handled. But during the operation, Carol and Maggie are taken, and in the same boat, the series does something the church meeting never did. It lets the other side talk. Carol explains that the biker crew attacked first. They invoked Negan's name. Alexandria believed it had to stop him before he found them. Paula, the woman leading their captors, does not even fight that first part. Once she hears about the roadside ambush, she accepts that destroying that crew was self-defense. But her question is, what came after? If the immediate danger died on the road, why walk into a building full of sleeping people? That question matters because Paula and the women with her do not experience themselves as anonymous parts of a monster. They talk about people they have lost. They talk about what survival has turned them into. Then Michelle tells Maggie, "You're not the good guys." Therefore, from the captor's side of the room, the strangers who entered their outpost before dawn have no clean claim to that title either. Then Molly says the sentence that cracks Rick's picture of the enemy wide open. "We are all Negan." Carol asks what that means. She never gets a complete answer, but she gets enough to know the name is bigger than one man in one building. Carol and Maggie eventually escape by killing the people holding them. The episode never asks you to pretend those captors were harmless. It asks something more uncomfortable, whether knowing that someone belongs to a violent system tells you everything you need to know about the person before they are awake, armed, or standing in front of you. Later, Rick confronts Primo, a wounded savior already captured and restrained. Rick wants a simple answer. Was Negan inside the outpost, or at the safe house where Carol and Maggie were held? Both. "I'm Negan, shithead." Rick says he is sorry, and shoots him. You can read that as wartime efficiency, a dangerous enemy, a live conflict, no room for risk. But you can also read it as the moment Rick receives another clue that the enemy works differently than he assumed, and decides he does not need the next answer. Primo's words do not map the whole savior network. Therefore, killing him does guarantee he will never draw that map. Watch the progression. The road gives Rick a name, therefore Hilltop gives him an outpost, but Molly reveals that the name is shared. Therefore, Primo confirms it. Every new answer makes the enemy larger. while Rick's method stays locked on the certainty he carried out of that church. None of this makes the saviors innocent. Rory was murdered as a warning. The biker crew was ready to kill Abraham as an introduction. The Polaroids were real. The hostage system was real. Rick chose the right enemy, but his mistake was believing that choosing the right enemy made every decision against them clean. Therefore, that certainty starts to collapse in Last Day on Earth. Rick is trying to get a desperately ill Maggie to Hilltop when a small group of saviors blocks the road. He turns around, but another group is waiting. Then the RV hits a line of walkers chained across the asphalt. One is wearing pieces of Michonne's clothing and strands of her hair. Another has Daryl's arrows pushed through it. Gunfire comes out of the trees, aimed low enough to force them back without ending the chase. That detail is the point. The saviors could tear the RV apart, but they do not. They fire at the ground and leave routes open because they are not trying to stop Rick at random. They are steering him. Therefore, every time he changes direction, the next piece of the trap is already in place. Another route reveals dozens of saviors. The next ends at a massive wall of logs. In front of Rick's group, they hang a captured man from the overpass and set the logs on fire. Every obstacle shows another piece of the organization Rick attacked. More soldiers, better coordination, heavier equipment. By nightfall, the group abandons the RV and carries Maggie through the woods while whistles answer each other from every direction. Eugene volunteers to drive the empty RV as a decoy. It is their last attempt to step outside the design, but Eugene is captured. The RV is taken. Therefore, the path through the trees leads to the same place every road was always leading. They were never escaping the trap. They were being walked into it. In the clearing, Rick is disarmed and forced to his knees beside the people he loves. Negan steps out of the RV and says Rick killed his men. Alexandria will work for him now. Half of everything. And because Rick's people killed so many saviors, one of them is going to die as a lesson. Negan makes the distinction himself. He does not want the whole group dead, because dead people cannot produce. He wants survivors who understand that their homes, their supplies, and even their choices now belong to him. Therefore, the killing is not the end of his plan. It is a demonstration stage to make the rest of that plan possible. This is not the same offer Rick gave the sleeping men. Rick's plan left no surrender on the table. Negan intends to kill one person and own the rest. Their motives and systems are not morally equal. Negan turns cruelty into theater. He calls people property. He wants an audience. Rick has built nothing like that, but part of the reasoning rhymes. At the church, Rick judged an entire building as one threat and called lethal violence necessary to protect his community. Therefore, in the clearing, Negan judges Rick's entire group together and calls lethal violence necessary to enforce his rule. That comparison does not turn Rick into Negan. It puts Rick on the other side of a kind of certainty he used to control, while he waits to learn which person will pay for a war he opened without knowing its size. In The Day Will Come When You Won't Be, Negan chooses Abraham. After Daryl attacks him, he chooses Glenn too. Those murders belong to Negan. Rick did not cause Glenn's death. The savior system existed before Alexandria ever hit the outpost. A network built on finding communities and taking half of everything would likely have reached Alexandria eventually. That distinction matters. Incomplete intelligence helps explain why Alexandria walks into the trap, but it does not transfer responsibility for Negan's choices. Negan picks the victims. Negan picks the spectacle. Negan decides their deaths will be a lesson. The outpost gives him a grievance he can perform in front of his army. It does not force him to become the man holding Lucille. But the raid did open a war against the right enemy without understanding how many people stood behind the name. Much later, in Wrath, that enemy finally breaks. Eugene has sabotaged the ammunition he made for the saviors. When they fire, their own weapons fail. Therefore, fighters start surrendering. The system that once looked too large to understand suddenly loses its army in open daylight. Negan runs. Rick follows him under a tree, and the two of them fight alone. Rick asks for 10 seconds. He wants to honor Carl's vision of a future that is not endless killing. Negan hesitates. Therefore, Rick uses that hesitation to cut his throat with a shard of glass. For a second, the story looks ready to repeat itself. A helpless enemy is bleeding on the ground. Rick has already decided what he deserves. But then Rick calls for Sadiq. Save him! Maggie's anger is justified. Negan murdered her husband. Saving him cannot undo that. But here, Rick separates ending a system from erasing the man in front of him. Therefore, Negan is put in a cell where the communities can use his survival, not his corpse, as proof that his way of ruling is finished. That choice does not clean the outpost. It does not make the sleeping men innocent. It does not make Rick guilty of Negan's crimes. It does not bring anybody back. What it changes is the question Rick is willing to ask at the end. At the outpost, stopping the system and killing the people inside it were treated as the same decision. But with Negan bleeding in the dirt, Rick finally refuses to let those two decisions stay identical. So, did Rick become a villain on the night of the outpost? Not to Alexandria, not to Hilltop, and nothing close to what Negan became. But picture that raid from inside the building. Armed strangers enter before dawn. They move from bed to bed. They decide who you are before they hear your name. because of a vote taken in a church by people you have never met. There is no chance to surrender. No chance to explain that you were a guard, a scavenger, a bully, a coward, or just a body sleeping under somebody else's rules. There is only the knife, and the story the people holding it already believe. Therefore, from that side of the door, Rick does not arrive as the hero of Alexandria. He arrives as the villain with the knife. And that is the night the title is really about. Not the night he lost. The night he was so sure he was right that he stopped needing to know who he was killing. If you think Rick crossed that line somewhere else, tell me the episode. And if you want more Walking Dead stories broken down scene by scene, subscribe.